As a new season of anime has come around and is now in full swing, I recently found myself watching a lot of new shows from all different kinds of genres, including spider mech fights, melodramas, and of course the tried and true rom-com, because yeah, those are always good. Yet, as I was watching these, one particular show caught my attention more than any other, and to be honest, I didn't expect it to. That show was Super Cub. I first heard about Super Cub from reading a couple chapters of the manga adaptation, which drew me into watching it when I saw there was an anime airing. Otherwise, it would have likely flown completely under my radar. As far as I'm aware, it's a show that hasn't had much hype to it, or really had anything about it. But that's really to be expected. Instead of being anything experimental, flashy, or over the top, Super Cub seeks to tell a more calming, down-to-earth story about a relatively minor hobby interest of scooter riding. It's not something that leaves me at the edge of my seat, but instead just leaves me satisfied and relaxed after 24 minutes. The story follows Koguma, a shy high school girl living by herself, who one day stops at a bike shop and with some encouragement from the owner buys a used Honda Super Cub, hence the title. The rest of the anime past that point revolves around the experiences with her and her Super Cub. In a more general sense, it's a show about exploring a newfound freedom and someone opening up a previously closed off world where the cub is a key. Each episode of the show is usually low stakes and little conflict ensues. It tries to accurately mirror real life and, well, in real life, things are mundane. The real connecting thread of all the episodes is the general hobby experience of owning a scooter. One episode, the main conflict is Koguma running out of gas, and she learns how to ride a scooter and read a manual. One episode's main plot was about finding goggles to keep wind out of her eyes. Another portrayed the finding of a new friend that shares the hobby of riding scooters. All these seem to be related to occurrences that someone would have if they had a Super Cub, and trying to create an authentic representation for those interested. But that's not what made the show keep me watching, because I'm not interested in that. I've never rode on a scooter before, I've never had interest in riding one before, and aside from a few sparse thoughts after watching the show air, I currently have no intention of doing so. I have no passion for scooters that would cause me to watch something like this, but I do anyway. It's not the Cubs, but Koguma, which makes the show so incredible. Her newfound hobby and the experiences that surround it is one of the most authentic representations of a high schooler newfound passion and personal growth that I have ever seen, and it can convey such an understanding of her with little more than her facial expressions, small body movements, and how she personally acts. One of the best things of the show is that we know exactly the type of person Koguma is and many of her internal thoughts without ever needing the show to have to tell us a thing. Really, the only ever complete glimpses into her mind that we get, at least so far, is a single scene of what is going on in her imagination one school day and what she writes in her journal. The rest has to be inferred from what we see, and the show uses specific scenes to allow us to do just that. There's long-winded scenes of her eating alone at her apartment with no music, and watching her do that mechanically and almost detached from any real feeling while doing so helps us understand that she's lonely and just what that loneliness feels like. Like her life seems like it's going through the motions without anything or one to really look forward to. It does all of that without ever having to outright tell us that she's lonely. In other scenes, tiny details like her constantly looking at the kids at the microwave during lunch, or staring at her new friend Raiko when she meets her is not just telling of her wanting to interact with others but feeling isolated. It feels personally relatable. What comes off is painfully reminiscent of classes or places where I knew no one, felt like a fish out of water, and was stuck idling my thumbs by myself. Her staring at her friend almost gives off the idea of wanting to open up conversation, yet not having the courage to do so, longing for Raiko to come to her instead. This use of small details and cues in order to understand the scene, and lack of use of traditional methods, is purposeful. The show has long swaths of nothing really happening that almost forces the viewer to notice everything little happening and come to conclusions based on that. If I have to actively grapple with the show and enjoy all the small scenes filled with tiny details which make it so great, in order to understand that, I have to do that step of making personal connections to the show. The end result of all of that is that after every episode, I come off with not just the ability to understand someone so well and what they are thinking and what is happening, but also to personally relate to Koguma and what is happening. It is this what turns this hobby show into the compelling and engaging story that it is. As a testament to the show, it's interesting how even the most minute of scenes stuck out to me. Usually when I think to other shows I've watched and what is memorable, it's the major parts. JoJo's has the 7-page Muda, and yeah, there's a reason that scene's memorable. Yet, for Super Cub, what's more memorable to me than her buying her cub is a relatively minor scene of her buying a pair of shoes and watch in the 4th episode. She had just been confirmed for a new job, and in both preparation for it and celebration, she goes shopping. It hits on the youthful feeling of getting a source of income and the ability to indulge herself for the first time. The smile that she puts on gives off a feeling of confidence and power that the money brings, and is a reminder of the first time I could buy something expensive and the giddy feeling I had myself. It's these little scenes all together, all being small and uneventful individually, but all combining together to form her new experiences which make the show worth it. It's a reflection of our own lives, which don't often have world-changing events, but are full of their own small, meaningful experiences, like these shown in Super Cub. The thing is, while the show provides a really good method of portraying scenes so that they're completely understood, relatable, and meaningful with a more hands-off approach, and that the show's good craft, it's not really enough to praise the show with flying colors. More, the praise comes from how the craft is used in order to tell its actual story. Its story of personal growth. Seeing as the show takes place 90% of the time on the freeway, at her home, at the classroom, and at the school entrance, you get to see not just the way she acts and what can be drawn from it, but how her act changes. For example, several times we see her eating lunch with Raiko, and slowly becoming more comfortable and opening up to one of her first friends. The first time, she's purely listening. She doesn't contribute to the conversation, and she looks troubled and awkward with her friend, reflective of how she's generally bad around other people. Yet later on, as we see her eating again, she's more open and is actively talking and participating. She's still closed off and quite shy, but at the same time is starting to genuinely be part of a relationship. Much like real life, nothing is explicitly said to solidify their relationship, nor is there any real hurdle that is seen that makes it clear just when they went from strangers to friends. It's a very natural progression. At another point in the show, with her summer job, we see the same thing. It's once again normal and repetitive, but we see the job's effect on her as she gains a newfound sense of confidence. The first time she goes to deliver to another school, she has to hype herself up and take a moment to prep to even enter the room that she's going to finally deliver the documents. Then, when talking to the other teacher, she says little and tries to get out as quickly as possible. She's in another school that's foreign to her, talking to someone she doesn't know, much less one of her peers but a teacher, and that makes her uncomfortable as hell. Because of her little actions, even though things carry out pretty much normally, her little movements and actions throughout the scene manage to transform this perfectly normal scene of a transfer of documents into a really tense and awkward one. When Koguma later gets asked for tea, there's understanding that makes you feel how disheartened she feels because she just wants to get out of there. Yet later, the scene also provides a point of contrast, as a later montage of her going to the school again and again shows her less tense and more talkative in passing. giving indication, of course, not just that time is passing, but she is growing more and more accustomed and comfortable with her job and happy with her choice to make. Though I bring up these scenes as signs of her growth, I must make it clear that these scenes definitely aren't the only signs of her growth. When I say that the small details are what shows her growth, I mean truly the small details. Even something as small as how she kicks her Super Cub in order to get it to start shows her growing and becoming more accustomed to her new vehicle. It's almost amazing how almost nothing gets overlooked as the show progresses to show her growth. Super Cub excels at being a realistic show, not just in setting, but on how the world works. It taps into an understanding that many times in life there aren't just any clues to tell us how to feel, and that there aren't markers to tell us much. Just as she buys her Super Cub in the first episode, not realizing what an impact it will have on her, and she changes as a person without noticing. Nothing particularly special is given to places with big importance. Instead, they just pass by without anyone really noticing, and their importance is only noticed later on with their effects. Or the show even shows how the smallest of things can be impactful in the moment. The show taps into the idea of how much life is not just explicitly stated. We go through life not with grand events, but with small increments, and we understand the world not through grand statements and exposition, but little movements. Super Cub is a show about personal growth that is not flashy, yet constantly happening, slowly and steadily moving and humming along.